Alright, good day all. So we're moving on to Surah 65, Surah at-Talaq, right? And the meaning of it is divorce, right? Of course, the principle that we want to teach and the values we want to teach in Islam is that you don't reach a point where you have to get divorced, right? But to reach that point, you need to check back in my previous videos where I did a whole series, well, a couple videos in this series of videos talking about relationships and things that you should discuss, right, before you actually get into a serious relationship, so that certain things don't be problematic after you jump into that relationship, right? Or after you to avoid taking that jump into a relationship, or risk, if you want to call it that, because risks come with consequences as well, right? So if you will take back a look at one of my previous videos, and it's in the title, right, discussing things prior to building a serious relationship and all that, so that when you go into a relationship it becomes one of peace and stability, right? Peace, stability, wisdom, right? And not one of a up and down fluctuating this or that and all over the place kind of relationship, right? So but anyhow, the topic about this is divorce, right? And it is about the reason for this is because sometimes God will separate you from somebody else, and then he will bring you back together with that person, or evolved version of that person, or something like that, right? Because it is intended for you to learn certain lessons, right? And then by virtue of learning and applying these lessons, right, you attract a certain vibration or person or people or whoever it be into your life, right? And so you get the opportunity again to build something anew, right, by virtue of learning and applying lessons, right? So divorce, right, so it's about facing yourself, learning to face yourself, and as I said, nobody on earth will die without receiving the message of the Quran, right? Nobody henceforth, like going forward in time, will die without receiving the message of the Quran, right? So there are just a couple points in this chapter that I would like to make, right? If you are divorcing somebody, right, if you and your husband or wife are going through a divorce, or your commitment person, a boyfriend, girlfriend who you've been committed to, you are going through a divorce and you'll live together and so on, right? The appropriate thing to do is to maintain cordial relationships, especially if children are involved and all that, right? You don't want your child to be affected by the personal relationship or the personal lack of relationship between you and your wife or you and your significant other, right? So if both husband and wife are going through a divorce or separation, right, you would like to keep those issues between yourself and not have your children get intimately involved in those matters, because these things can have psychological impacts later on in life, right? So maintain, if you all have to live together, right, for a period of time until that separation actually occurs, right, or have to occur, physical separation, then maintain that physical, that person in your physical space, and maintain cordial relations with that person, right? So that's point number one, right? Point number two is to live within your means, right? You know that there's only a certain amount of things I can afford at the moment because of certain powers that be, and certain things, oppression and so on, corruption on earth, all these things, right? For whatever reason, or by virtue of the lack of your own effort, right? Whatever it be, you have only a certain amount of resources to work with at a particular point in time, right? You live within your means and you strive to not go beyond that, right? So it's one of the things actually in building proper families, right, that you strive to live within your means, meaning you don't spend above that which you can afford, right? You don't spend above that which you can afford, right? And if you've been following my videos, right, from scratch or from when I mentioned speak, so on, right, you will see that the points I've talked about, right, gives tips, and I am a minimalist person, meaning that I am not a luxurious person or desire such, right? I could function on a certain amount of clothes, a certain amount of food, right? So this is what we are striving to to help people to attain if you're in that situation. Although one of the things I am pushed and compelled to talk about is to have people not stress over things like stability, money, and these things, right? Do not stress over, to help people to not stress or be stressed out, because this is something that has stressed me out in life, you know, like, hey, if I were to get into a relationship, if I were to build a family or a child, bring a child into the world or something, can I afford this, right? Can I afford this? How am I going to pay certain things, right? So one of the things actually the universe, or the creator of the universe has entrusted unto me, is to help people, by virtue of helping myself, to not be stressing over things like money, right? Things of the material, things of the world, things like stability, soundness, right? Because the earth is actually available, right? The earth is here, right? And is available, right? So we want to create or recreate, if for want of a better word, or create that scenario where people can be free, right? People can be free enough to inhabit, right? Especially those who were previously disadvantaged, to inhabit, right? Earth and spaces of the earth without having to worry about, hey, where's this money going to come from? Where's this resource going to come from? How am I going to finance my child? How am I going to finance my family, right? So the earth is available, right? And if people let go of greed and attachment to these things, right, we can move forward in this direction in a very peaceful way, right? It just takes you detaching yourself from greed, right? From a holding on to this, oh, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine, and holding on to these things like property, land, all these things, right? Do not harm anybody in order to oppress them, right? Refrain from doing things like that. Let a man, if you are wealthy, let them spend from his wealth, right? And he whose provision is restricted, let them spend from what Allah has given to them, right? Allah does not charge a soul except according to what he has given it. Allah will bring about, after hardship, relief, right? So pay attention to the distinct verses that are being revealed to you, right? So that you might pull out the lessons from these verses and apply it to your life to make it a better, to make the world a better place, to make yourself a better place, right? So it's about facing yourself, right, before you can. And I hope that this message reaches at least one person in the generation after me, right? Because we are about helping people to not make the same mistakes that we did and the generations prior to us made, right? And always, right? So we are about what? Building proper families from scratch, right? So we do not have to reach a point where you end up, unfortunately, in a situation of divorce or separation without a reason, appropriate reason, right? So take care, everybody. We'll move on to Surah 66 tomorrow, inshallah, God's willing, right? Good.